Television networks in the 1970s threw everything at the wall to see what stuck. Most of it splattered on the floor, faster than you could change the channel. One show got canceled after literally one episode aired. Another cost more than most Hollywood blockbusters and lasted 9 episodes. A third featured a detective paired with a malfunctioning robot that picked up Swedish radio signals. These weren't just bad shows, they were spectacular disasters that burned through budgets and careers alike. Turn On. ABC's answer to Laugh-In was supposed to revolutionize television comedy in 1969. Instead, it became the most infamous single-episode cancellation in TV history. The show featured rapid-fire jokes, computer graphics, and risque humor that made network executives break into cold sweats. At least one station, WEWS-TV in Cleveland, actually canceled the show while it was still airing, creating an urban legend that they pulled it after the first commercial break. Other West Coast stations refused to air it at all. ABC executives watched their phones ring off the hook with complaints and pulled the plug before the second episode could traumatize more viewers. The show was so controversial that it made stations on the West Coast refuse to broadcast it sight unseen. ABC canceled the show before airing another episode, making it one of the fastest failures in television history. Turn On proved that sometimes being ahead of your time just means crashing and burning in spectacular fashion. The show's sexual and political humor was too hot for 1969 television, but its legacy lives on as the gold standard for instant TV death. Co-ed fever. In 1978, Animal House changed comedy forever, and every TV executive wanted their piece of the gross-out pie. What they cooked up was Co-ed Fever, a raunchy college sitcom about an all-female school admitting its first male students. The show starred future character actors David Keith and Heather Thomas in what can only be described as television's answer to a hormone-addled fever dream. CBS was so horrified by what they'd created that they canceled it after just one episode, making it one of the fastest TV failures of all time. The network had produced 6 episodes, but only aired one before realizing they had made a terrible mistake. The show was part of a wave of unsuccessful Animal House knockoffs that proved not every hit movie translates to television. Co-ed Fever joined 2 other Animal House-inspired sitcoms in early 1979, and by summer, all 3 had been canceled. The premise seemed foolproof. Take a successful R-rated comedy and sanitize it for primetime. Instead, they created something so painfully unfunny that even desperate network programmers couldn't stomach it. The show remains a textbook example of how not to capitalize on a movie trend. Super Train. Super Train made history as one of the most expensive television disasters ever produced. NBC spent $5 million just building the train set, and each episode cost nearly $2 million to produce. The show followed passengers aboard a futuristic luxury train that traveled across America, complete with a swimming pool, discotheque, and shopping center. Think Love Boat on rails, except without any of the charm or chemistry that made Love Boat work. Despite heavy network promotion, audiences simply didn't show up, and the expensive experiment was canceled after 9 episodes. The network desperately tried to cut costs by reworking the cast, but that only made things worse. The show was so notorious that Mystery Science Theater 3000 dedicated an episode to mocking it. Super Train proved that throwing money at a bad concept doesn't make it better. It just makes the failure more expensive. The train set was so massive that NBC had trouble figuring out what to do with it after cancellation. The show remains a cautionary tale about big budgets and bigger egos in television production. The Brady Bunch Hour. Take television's most beloved sitcom family, add songs, dances, and variety show skits, and you get television necromancy because the result was definitely populated by The Walking Dead. TV Guide consistently ranks The Brady Bunch Hour as one of the top 5 worst TV shows of all time. The shameless money grab attempted to recapture the magic of the original sitcom, but spectacularly missed the mark. Only one of the original Brady kids was actually trained to sing and dance, which was a big problem when over half the show consisted of musical numbers. Making matters worse, the original Jan Brady actress didn't even participate, leaving fans with Fake Jan forever etched in their memories. Only Robert Reed himself seemed enthusiastic about the project, while the rest of the untrained, uninterested cast struggled through embarrassing musical performances. The show lasted just 9 episodes before ABC mercifully pulled the plug. Though the pilot was a ratings success, the show-within-a-show storyline was a complete flop. The Brady Bunch hour proved that beloved characters don't automatically translate to different formats, especially when nobody involved seems to want to be there. Holmes and Yo-Yo. Detective shows were hugely popular in the 1970s, so naturally someone thought pairing a human detective with a malfunctioning android partner was television gold. Holmes and Yo-Yo follow Detective Alexander Holmes and his experimental robot police officer named Yo-Yo, whose constant breakdowns provided the show's comedy. Yo-Yo would randomly break into dance, pick up Swedish radio signals, or act like a skipping record during crucial moments. The show desperately mined laughs from the robot's numerous glitches, while Detective Holmes tried to solve crimes with his increasingly unreliable partner. TV Guide lists Holmes and Yo-Yo as one of the worst shows ever made, and it was critically maligned during its brief run. Despite the inventive flipping of the traditional Holmes and Watson roles, the show suffered from horrible writing and was canceled after 13 episodes. ABC wasn't completely discouraged by the failure and greenlit similar shows like Future Cop and RoboCop, proving that sometimes networks learn the wrong lessons from their mistakes. The show remains a fascinating artifact of 1970s sci-fi optimism gone wrong. Holmes and Yo-Yo demonstrated that high-concept premises need solid execution to work, something the writers apparently never figured out. Me and the Chimp. Despite sounding like an idea invented by rowdy 6-year-olds, Me and the Chimp was a real CBS sitcom that aired for 1 season in 1972. The show was created by TV legend Gary Marshall, who would later develop Happy Days and Laverne and Shirley, making this failure even more puzzling. The premise centered on the Reynolds family and their pet chimpanzee Buttons, who invariably got the family into trouble each week. Whether he turned off alarm clocks or ruined hand-drawn maps, Buttons was pure mischief, and that's literally the entire basis of the show. Just reading or hearing the title is enough to cause hysterics, and despite Marshall's involvement, it was a major flop for CBS. The show was almost titled the more grammatically correct The Chimp and I, but lead actor Ted Bessel objected to the change. Despite being created by the same producer behind other CBS hits, Me and the Chimp was canceled after just 13 episodes. The premise was painfully thin, essentially building an entire series around a chimp causing household chaos. The show proved that even legendary producers can misfire spectacularly when they don't have solid material to work with. Me and the Chimp remains a bizarre footnote in Gary Marshall's otherwise impressive television career. Three's a crowd. What if the newlywed game became a contest to see who knew a man better, his wife or his secretary? That recipe for disaster became Three's a Crowd in 1979. The game show featured a man answering questions about his personal life while his wife and secretary competed to match his responses. Whoever matched the most, answers won $1,000, but viewers got to watch marriages literally torn apart in real time on national television. Host Chuck Barris created this marital nightmare that seemed specifically designed to destroy relationships for entertainment value. Each question and answer was more cringeworthy than the last, and it was obvious the contestants weren't having fun watching their lives ruined on TV. Three's a Crowd is often regarded as one of the most infamous game show failures of all time. The show caused problems in viewers' marriages and was a general flop, leaving networks no choice but to cancel it after just a few episodes. The concept was not only painfully sexist, but actively harmful to the participants involved. Barris seemed to think that public humiliation would make for compelling television, but audiences couldn't stomach watching real relationships destroyed for their entertainment. Three's a Crowd demonstrated how game shows could cross ethical lines in pursuit of ratings, creating a blueprint for what not to do in reality television. Mr. T and Tina. ABC wanted to create a spin-off from Welcome Back, Kotter, but their attempt became one of the lowest-rated shows of the 1970s. The show starred Pat Morita and Susan Blanchard as a Japanese inventor named Taro Takahashi, who hires a ditzy American nanny to help him adjust to life in Chicago. The show relied almost entirely on cultural misunderstanding jokes, with each episode featuring the nanny misinterpreting Japanese customs, while Mr. T struggled with American idioms. What could have been a groundbreaking moment for Asian American representation became an uncomfortable parade of stereotypes that neither critics nor audiences embraced. ABC canceled it after just 5 episodes, though some sources say 9 episodes were produced. One writer reported that ABC had already decided to cancel the show before the pilot had even aired. The premise had potential to explore cultural differences with intelligence and humor, but instead devolved into tired racial comedy that felt dated even in 1976. The show was also one of the first sitcoms centered on an Asian American lead, but the execution was clunky at best. Mr. T and Tina remains a missed opportunity to create meaningful representation on television, wasted on lazy writing and cultural stereotypes. Dog and Cat. The name wasn't the only bad thing about Dog and Cat, which premiered in 1977 and lasted only 6 episodes after receiving terrible ratings and negative reviews. The police series paired rookie detective J.Z. Kane, played by future superstar Kim Basinger, with veteran officer Jack Ramsey. This was Kim Basinger's first TV role after working as a model, and even her stunning looks and cool Volkswagen Bug couldn't keep viewers interested. The New York Times described it as particularly repulsive, while audiences hated it and gave it awful ratings. The show followed the standard cop buddy formula, but failed to create any chemistry between the leads or compelling cases for them to solve. The most interesting thing about Dog and Cat is that it launched Kim Basinger's acting career before she became a major movie star. The series tried to capitalize on the 1970s popularity of police procedurals, but brought nothing new or exciting to the overcrowded genre. The writing was weak, the production values were cheap, and the cases were forgettable. Dog and Cat proved that even future A-list talent can't save a fundamentally flawed television concept. The show remains notable only as a footnote in Basinger's impressive career trajectory. Blansky's Beauties, Happy Days spawned multiple spin-offs, but this bizarre attempt transported Nancy Blansky to present-day Las Vegas, where she managed showgirls while dispensing tough love advice. The show desperately tried connecting to its parent series by claiming Nancy was Howard Cunningham's cousin, but the timeline gymnastics made viewers' heads spin. Nancy Walker, known for the Bounty paper towel commercials, seemed completely out of place managing sequin dancers in the glitzy entertainment capital. Even more confusing, a young Scott Baio appeared as a character named Chachi, but not the same Chachi from Happy Days, creating continuity nightmares for fans. The whole enterprise felt like a rejected variety show concept, hastily connected to Happy Days to boost ratings. The show abandoned the wholesome 1950s charm that made Happy Days work for a generic Vegas setting that had no connection to the original. Nancy Walker was talented, but her character seemed to have wandered in from a completely different show universe. The concept was odd, the humor didn't land, and it only lasted 13 episodes before disappearing from television forever. Blansky's Beauties demonstrated how desperate networks could get when trying to milk successful franchises for additional hits. The show proved that familiar characters need appropriate settings to work effectively. Tabitha. Hoping to recapture the magic of Bewitched, ABC launched this spin-off centered on Samantha and Darren's now adult daughter working at a TV station while hiding her magical powers. Instead of the charming whimsy of the original, Tabitha was a bland sitcom with forgettable plots and serious continuity issues. The timeline made absolutely no sense, with Tabitha aging about 20 years while everyone else barely aged at all. Even more confusing, the show made Tabitha older than her younger brother Adam from the original series, completely breaking established family dynamics. The show was plagued with casting problems, recasting Tabitha with Lisa Hartman, and making her older than she should have been, according to the original show. 3 different actresses had played Tabitha in Bewitched, but none of them were cast in the spin-off, completely breaking the continuity that might have saved the show. Lisa Hartman played the role with charm, But without the chemistry of the original cast, or Elizabeth Montgomery's magical presence, the spell was completely broken. The show lasted only one season before fading into complete obscurity. Tabitha proved that magical sitcoms need more than nose-twitching special effects to succeed. They need the right cast and creative vision. The show remains a textbook example of how not to continue a beloved television franchise. The Ropers. Three's Company was a massive hit, so ABC created this spin-off featuring the nosy landlords Stanley and Helen Roper, who moved to an upscale neighborhood where Stanley's working-class ways clashed with Helen's social climbing. The show attempted to capitalize on the enormous success of the original, but failed to realize that the Ropers weren't likable enough for people to watch them carry their own series. Without Jack Tripper's mishaps to comment on, the Ropers' marriage jokes grew stale faster than week-old bread. Norman Fell and Audra Lindley tried valiantly to make their one-note characters work, but their bickering about their non-existent love life couldn't sustain 30 minutes of television. The characters weren't funny or interesting enough on their own, so audiences quickly stopped watching. The Ropers worked perfectly as supporting characters who could pop in to create complications for the main cast, but they had no depth for their own storylines. The show did manage 2 seasons with 28 episodes total, and in the late 80s, a spin-off for the spin-off was pitched but pulled because there were too many sitcoms at the time. The Ropers demonstrated that successful supporting characters don't automatically make compelling leads. The show proved that comic relief characters need the main story to comment on, not their own separate adventures. Grady. After Red Fox left Sanford and Son, the network tried spinning off the character Grady into his own series. But there was one major problem. Grady was never a well-developed character. Fox wanted to develop Grady and make it into a great show, but the character lacked the depth and personality needed to carry his own series. The show followed Grady Wilson as he moved away from the junkyard to live with his daughter and her family in middle-class suburundings. Without Fred Sanford's abrasive personality to play against, Grady's gentle nature had nothing to bounce off. The show flopped pretty quickly, and audiences completely forgot about it within a few years. The premise tried to transplant a working-class character into a middle-class setting, but the culture clash never generated compelling comedy. Grady worked as Fred's long-suffering friend who could occasionally provide sage advice, but he wasn't dynamic enough to drive his own stories. The supporting cast couldn't compensate for the weak central character, and the writing failed to find fresh angles for Grady's new living situation. The show lasted only one season before NBC quietly canceled it and pretended it never happened. Grady proved that spin-offs need strong central characters with rich personalities, not just familiar faces from successful shows. Fish. Abe Vigoda's deadpan detective Phil Fish was the comedic highlight of Barney Miller, perpetually complaining about his hemorrhoids and impending retirement. ABC thought audiences would love watching this cantankerous detective become a foster father to 5 troubled inner-city kids in this spin-off. The premise transformed Fish from a hilariously grumpy colleague into an overwhelmed caretaker, completely changing the character's appeal. Without the precinct's ensemble cast and confined to domestic problems, Fish's cynicism became less amusing and more concerning when directed at children. The show tried mixing slapstick humor with heartwarming moments, but the combination never quite worked. Replacing workplace comedy with family drama robbed Fish of everything that made him funny in the original series. Vigoda did his best with the material, but asking a character known for complaining about his health to suddenly become a nurturing father figure was a bridge too far. The show lasted 2 seasons but never found its comedic footing or dramatic center. The show failed to capture a strong audience and was ultimately canceled, largely forgotten today, and overshadowed by Vigoda's more successful projects. Fish demonstrated that beloved supporting characters often work best in their original context, not transplanted to completely different settings. All That Glitters. All That Glitters attempted to flip traditional gender roles by creating a world where women held all the powerful positions, while men were treated as second-class citizens. The soap opera parody was created by Norman Lear and was supposed to provide social commentary through role reversal comedy and drama. Upon its release, All That Glitters was panned by contemporary critics and received overwhelmingly negative reception from audiences. The premise had potential to explore gender dynamics and workplace inequality through satirical storytelling, but the execution was heavy-handed and preachy. Before making it halfway through the series, the show lost half its audience, and 13 weeks later, it was canceled. The show's attempt at social commentary came across as forced lecturing rather than entertaining television, alienating viewers who wanted engaging stories instead of political messages. The role reversal concept quickly became repetitive, with the same gender-swapping jokes repeated in different workplace scenarios week after week. The production values were cheap, making the show look more like a low-budget daytime soap than a primetime satirical comedy. All That Glitters tried to be too many things at once without excelling at any of them. The show proved that social commentary needs to be integrated naturally into compelling story tines, rather than serving as the entire basis for a series. Gemini Man. This science fiction series followed a secret agent who gained the power of invisibility through a special wristwatch. But the show was plagued by terrible writing and unconvincing special effects. The premise tried to capitalize on the popularity of superhero and spy genres by combining them into a single character with unique abilities. The show was so bad that Mystery Science Theater 3000 had an episode dedicated to mocking it, and no one could determine whether the writing or the acting was more to blame for its failure. The invisibility effects were laughably primitive, even by 1970s television standards, making the central gimmick more ridiculous than exciting. Gemini Man had 11 episodes made, but only 5 were actually aired before NBC mercifully canceled the series. The stories relied too heavily on the invisibility concept, without developing compelling characters or interesting plot lines beyond the special effect. The show felt like a cheap imitation of better spy series without any of the wit, style, or production values that made those shows successful. The lead actor seemed uncomfortable with the material, delivering wooden performances that made the already weak scripts even more painful to watch. The show attempted to create a superhero franchise for television, but failed to understand what makes superhero stories compelling to audiences. Gemini Man remains a fascinating example of how a potentially interesting concept can be completely ruined by poor execution and limited imagination. The Brady Brides. The Brady Bunch spawned multiple failed spin-offs, but this early 1980s attempt was purely rooted in 1970s family sitcom nostalgia. The show followed Marcia and Jan as newlyweds navigating life and marriage in a generic sitcom format that abandoned the wholesome family charm of the original. The premise put neat freak Jan and her uptight husband sharing a house with messy Marcia and her fun-loving spouse, leading to predictable conflicts about cleaning and bills. Even Florence Henderson's occasional appearances as Carol Brady couldn't rescue the ratings from this painful domestic comedy. The show tried to update the Brady formula for married life, but completely missed what made the original family dynamics work. It only lasted 10 episodes before audiences and networks alike lost interest in watching the Brady sisters bicker about household chores. The writing reduced the beloved characters to one-dimensional stereotypes about marriage and domestic life. Remember how exciting it was when the Brady kids faced problems like breaking mom's favorite vase? Now, imagine those stakes lowered to arguments about whose turn it is to vacuum. The Brady Brides proved that childhood nostalgia doesn't automatically translate to adult entertainment. The show demonstrated how difficult it is to age beloved characters convincingly while maintaining their original appeal. Karen. Premiering on ABC in January 1975, Karen was a comedy series that followed the life of Karen Angelo, played by Karen Valentine, as she tried to manage her career and personal relationships. The show also featured early career appearances by future stars Ron Howard and Blythe Danner, who would both go on to have illustrious careers in film and television. The premise centered on a young woman working in Washington, D.C., while navigating the challenges of 1970s professional life, but the execution never lived up to its potential. The show tried to blend workplace comedy with romantic storylines, but failed to find a consistent tone or compelling character development. After a short 3 months and 13 episodes, the show was canceled, though it did launch the careers of Howard and Danner. The writing struggled to balance Karen's professional ambitions with traditional romantic comedy expectations, leaving the character feeling underdeveloped and inconsistent. The supporting cast couldn't compensate for weak storylines that never found their comedic or dramatic center. The show arrived during a time when networks were experimenting with career-focused female protagonists, but Karen never found its unique voice in a crowded field. The series remains notable mainly for featuring future stars before they became famous. Karen demonstrated that good casting can't save a show that lacks strong writing and clear creative direction. 3 for the Road. Aired on CBS in 1975, 3 for the Road had a star-studded cast and an interesting plot, but it still didn't manage to save the show from being a complete flop. The series followed a recently widowed photographer who decides to travel across America with his 2 sons in a Winnebago mobile home, searching for a new life and meaningful experiences. The concept had potential to explore themes of family, loss, and discovery, while showcasing different American locations each week. Unfortunately, the execution turned the promising premise into a tedious travel show with forced family bonding moments. The scripts relied too heavily on coincidental meetings, with colorful locals and life-changing encounters that felt completely artificial. Despite having talented actors and an intriguing concept, the show's production values were weak and the scripts were poorly written, making it an overall failure. The show tried to capitalize on the 1970s fascination with mobile lifestyles and cross-country adventures, but the stories never felt authentic or emotionally engaging. The family dynamics were superficial, and the weekly destinations became repetitive backdrops for generic life lessons. 3 for the Road lasted only 1 season before CBS mercifully ended the family's wandering journey. The show proved that interesting concepts need strong execution and authentic character development to succeed on television. Get Christy Love. ABC's 1974 show starred the beautiful Teresa Graves as Detective Christy Love, a tough police officer who worked for the LAPD's Special Investigations Division. The show might not have been a hit, but it remains memorable for attempting to create a strong female detective protagonist during a time when such characters were rare on television. Detective Love was known for her catchphrase and her ability to infiltrate criminal organizations using her street smarts and undercover skills. The series tried to blend police procedural elements with blaxploitation film aesthetics, creating a unique television hybrid that never quite found its audience. Unfortunately, the show was canceled after just 1 season, but Teresa Graves did a fine job with the challenging role despite the show's limitations. The writing struggled to balance serious police work with the campy elements expected from 1970s crime shows, leaving the tone inconsistent and confusing. The production budget was clearly limited, affecting the quality of action sequences and location shooting that the show needed to succeed. The show arrived during the height of the blaxploitation movie craze, but couldn't translate that energy effectively to television format. Get Christy Love remains an interesting artifact of 1970s, television's attempts to diversify its programming with strong minority characters. The show demonstrated both the potential and the challenges of creating groundbreaking television during a transitional period in media representation. The 1970s gave us television gold like All in the Family, MASH, and Mary Tyler Moore. But for every classic, there were dozens of disasters that networks tried to bury forever. These forgotten failures remind us that even in television's supposed golden age, executives were just as capable of greenlighting terrible ideas and watching them crash spectacularly. Which of these catastrophic shows do you think deserved its quick cancellation the most? And here's the real question that'll keep you up tonight. If these disasters could get on the air in the 1970s, what absolute garbage is being pitched in network boardrooms right now that we'll be laughing about in 50 years?